For the first time in 2025, we are excited to say that so golden phrase, let's play two. The Cardinals will take on the Boston Red Sox today, twice with yesterday's game being postponed due to weather. This is Cards Hub 365, bringing you up-to-date information, comments, and thoughts on your St. Louis Cardinals 365 days a year. I am Ethan Hannaford, joined today by Chris Pelikan. Chris, how are we doing this lovely morning?
We're doing fantastic. I hope the weather holds off in Boston. The very reliable weather app that I look at here says that there's some stuff going on now, but looking like we might be able to get 2 in today. So let's hope that the weather holds off in St. Louis, holds off in Boston, and we can get this thing done. Obviously, don't want to have to go back to Boston at a strange time later in the summer. There's no more trips. So you got to get these in today because it's going to make for a much easier schedule for the Cards down the line.
100% there, and we will definitely get into that. This schedule early in the year has no doubt been subject for a little bit of disaster when you take into consideration, this is the time of year where you're more likely to get some of that rain, and the Cardinals have started the year off with a series against 3 interleague opponents. It's interesting scheduling on the half of Major League Baseball. We'll talk more about that in just a second. First, I'll tell you that Cards Hub 365 is powered by Gray Bar here on Sports Hub STL. Gray Bar, your distributor for electrical and datacom needs, and then is presented by DraftKings. The crown is yours. So let's talk about that for a second before we get into this lineup, Chris. Like I said, a little bit of an interesting thought process, I guess I should say. Here, I understand, starting the new interleague play as far as getting to see these teams every other year is still exciting for fans. I think eventually that'll probably wear off a little bit more. But, fans, I don't think probably are used to seeing Mike Trout as much as they have here recently. And, I would say the same thing over in Boston. People aren't as used to seeing the St. Louis Cardinals, maybe not as star-studded as they once were, but it's still the St. Louis Cardinals. There's still excitement, I think, when they come into town. So there is still that effect. But eventually, that's going to wave off, and you have to wonder, how will the Major League Baseball handle the scheduling, especially early in the year when you have teams like the Cardinals going to take trips to Boston when otherwise it's going to be extremely inconvenient if they have to make a game up here and there. It could be interesting today if the Cardinals were to not get one in. Let's hope they get both in. But all of a sudden, it makes a road trip down the year extremely inconvenient.
Well, you say interesting, and I think you're being politically correct there. I think it's a terrible idea for Boston or for Major League Baseball to start a schedule this way, just for this sole reason. I mean, obviously, the climate in St. Louis is different than it is in Los Angeles and Arizona and Texas. But at the end of the day, the Midwest deals with rain at the end of March, early April, mid-April, that sort of thing. You got to give yourself a little bit of margin for error on the rescheduling stuff. And so the fact that, you had the Twins come in town who are not coming back to town. You have, the Angels come to town who are not coming back to town. All you are setting yourself up for is a mid-July, early August off day in which a team has to travel for one game to go play in Boston or come to St. Louis or whatever it ends up being. And the players have no interest in that whatsoever. So, Major League Baseball, again, hey, I coach little kids baseball. I understand how hard scheduling can be sometimes. I can only imagine for 30 teams, 162 games. But at the end of the day, they got to be smarter about this. And they've got to understand that weather delays are going to be a thing probably almost all the way through April. So let's put those in a place where they can be made up easily as part of doubleheaders later in the season or that sort of thing. Because I think, Ethan, when it comes to these players, those off days in the dog days in July and August, I mean, those things are worth their weight in gold. And so the fact that a team the Cardinals might have to leave Chicago instead of coming home, they got to go to Boston to play one game on a day that was scheduled to be off, that screws up your pitching, so the whole thing, I just think it's not fantastic planning. I know it's a tough job, but I do believe Major League Baseball can be better.
And I want to say that the Cardinals I guess the Cardinals did it once here at home last year where a game was postponed. I think it was against the Mets where they came back into town and it was extremely inconvenient for their schedule last year. And they came in and played one game, and I want to say that they beat the Cardinals pretty good in that game where they came back. So it didn't end up affecting them, standing wise. But you know what? It was a forgettable year altogether for St. Louis last year. So that kind of brings me into my next question. And then we'll move forward here, talk through the lineups here in a couple of minutes. But if you are Major League Baseball, like you said it, 162 games for 30 teams, how difficult do you have to imagine it is to try and make sure that the large majority of these interleague games are not happening for the first third of the season?
Yeah. I mean, you've got to sprinkle some in. I mean, when you have 15 teams in both leagues, there is going to be interleague play, but the idea of doing 3 interleague series to start the year, right. I mean, I just, you're asking for trouble is my point. They can be sprinkled in. I don't know what the rationale was behind doing it this way, but again, knock on wood. Hey, they got lucky that they were able to get all the games in with the Twins and the Angels, because again, at some point in time, those would have had to been made up. The weather, they flirted with bad weather. I was at opening day. Obviously that was a big issue. So, again, I mean, I just think that there's a lot of factors that have to go into the way they schedule. I'm laughing because I remember, Claves on this very show a couple days ago just talked about how, hey, the real solution is just to start the schedule later in the year. Cut games back, go to 150 game schedule, whatever. The owners probably won't be real excited about that.
Now I'm laughing too.
Yeah. But I mean, the truth is that this is what we deal with, right? And I'm guessing about half of the markets in Major League Baseball are pretty affected by early spring weather like this. So, be smarter about it because it's going to happen.
Sorry, I was muted there. What I was going to say is that, yeah, exactly. You have to expect that it is going to be part of the game, especially here in the Midwest where you're much more subject to get showers. So most definitely the MLB did not set themselves up for success. Hopefully it doesn't end up biting them too much. I don't know if any games outside of yesterday's for the Cardinals have been postponed throughout Major League Baseball. I know there's been a lot of interleague play to start off the year, which I understand. Like I said, I get what they're going for. You have these matchups that fans aren't used to seeing yet. It's the beginning of the year. There's a little bit of extra excitement. Yankees Brewers, typically that's going to be a pretty exciting series now. Then we all know what the Yankees did. Yeah. We all know it happened, but typically that's going to be a fun series. So I understand what they're doing, but they aren't thinking of it very logistically in the sense of what happens if you aren't able to get those games in. So most definitely an interesting subject. Let's go ahead and let's talk through these lineups today. We'll start off with the visiting St. Louis Cardinals, who will face off against Sean Newcomb today for the Boston Red Sox. This one getting started at 1:35 Eastern, so 12:35 local time. Lars Nootbaar leading things off. He'll be playing in left field. He'll be followed up by, this will be one to talk about a little bit here, in the 2 spot, playing in the 2 position. Ivan Herrera is catching today. I should have mentioned that Sean Newcomb is a left-hand pitcher. They've moved down Wilson Contreras to the 3 spot. Nolan Arenado at first base. Nolan Arenado in the cleanup at third base. Luken Baker batting 5th today, playing the designated hitter role in Game 1. Batting 6th in right field, Jordan Walker. Thomas Saggese getting his first start of the year with the injury to Nolan Gorman. He got the call up a couple of days ago, so he will be, at second base in the 7 spot. In the 8 spot, out in center field where he's been all season long, it'll be Victor Scott II. And then in the 9 spot, capping things out, will be Mason Wynn. He will be playing at short. Let's start with that. We know how much Ollie Marmol, there's been some questioning. Man, Mason's been struggling. Maybe he deserves an off day. No doubt here early in the season, he has not gotten that. Ollie has been very adamant that Mason Wynn is going to be the guy at shortstop. And today it'll be interesting to see if he plays too.
Yeah, it will be. But Ethan, you've gotten the chance to know Mason Wynn, since he's been up here. It's a confident kid, and I think that you got to handle all of these players individually. Mason Wynn is the kind of guy who I guarantee is in there telling Ollie, I need to be a part of this team. I need to be in the lineup every day. And look, let's be real about it. When we're talking about positions where offense is a bit of a bonus. I mean, there's basically two of them on the diamond, catcher and shortstop. And Mason's glove is different. His ability to run the bases is different. So he is providing value regardless of whether he's hitting or not. And, certain guys need the day off just to clear their minds. I think Mason Wynn is a guy who thinks he's working on stuff. He's getting through, he's looking at film. He's working with Brant Brown. He just needs to keep finding it. And when it clicks, it's probably going to click for him. So, it's a good question whether or not he sees both of them today. I would actually be surprised if he doesn't, because I just think that Ollie's made the statement that this is our guy. I mean, look at the roster construction to where they didn't carry a true backup shortstop out of spring training because that's how much they believe in Mason Wynn. So again, I'd be surprised if he doesn't play today and probably darn close to 162 this year, health pending.
Yeah, I agree with you. This being the first time that we're seeing a doubleheader this season, it'll be interesting to see, if that's going to continue, and we're going to see him play 18 innings on days where they're playing that many. That'll be something interesting to keep an eye on.
Ethan, one other thing to throw in there. So I just saw on X a little bit ago as well that the 27th man that the Red Sox called up today, Hunter Dobbins, who is a minor leaguer, and he is supposedly going to start the second game. Richard Fitz was supposed to start the first game yesterday. They're going to move him to Monday. The reason I just bring that up is we're talking about Sean Newcomb and we're talking about Hunter Dobbins. If you're going to get right as a hitter, let's go against a guy who's got about, who's got a 9 ERA right now in Sean Newcomb and a guy making his first ever appearance in, the major leagues today. So, he's not going up against Garrett Crochet. He's not going up against another, flamethrower. I mean, these two guys are the guys who might help Mason Wynn to find his stride today. So I think I'd be surprised if I don't see him play 18 today.
Well, I will say that traditionally, I would say this sets up as disaster for the St. Louis Cardinals because guys that are making, I don't know if it's Dobbins' debut, but guys that are making their debut tend to have had some historic success in recent years against the St. Louis Cardinals.
It's a different Cardinals lineup, my friend. Different Cardinals.
All jokes. Let's go ahead and get to the chat here a little bit. We want to hear your thoughts on this lineup, and you guys are certainly doing a great job of sharing your thoughts on this lineup. And people are wondering, why the heck is Wilson Contreras batting third? The sound of silence starts it off. Why is Wilson Contreras batting third when he should be swapped with Walker? What are they thinking there? What are your thoughts to that? Jordan Walker today batting in the 6th spot. He's been at the bottom of the lineup all season long. He's had success, but we also know that back when he had a lot of that success in 2023, it came playing in the bottom of the lineup. Your thoughts, Chris?
Yeah, no, I mean, why mess with Jordan Walker right now, right? I think the question with a lot of it is how do we keep Jordan's confidence, right? Because that's been an issue in previous years where the slumps happen and then it just goes downhill in a hurry. So I almost think Ollie's thinking, let's not mess with success. Contreras is in the same vein as Mason Wynn, confident guy. I think we all know Wilson's going to hit. I mean, it just seems a matter of time. And once again, you got two guys without a lot of track record. Maybe these are the guys to get right against today in Boston. So, I think that's got to be Ollie's mindset at this point in time. I just got to get these two guys, the only two pieces of my lineup who have not been right all year.
Right.
Let's get them right.
Which it makes you wonder, what is this lineup going to be once they do get it right? If the approach from the majority of from all of these guys stays the way that it has been through the first 7 games, boy, it has the potential to be something pretty exciting and pretty scary. At the same time, Samuel bringing up that, yes, Contreras has been awful at the plate, so they're moving him down in the lineup from number 2 so into the 3 spot.
That's where you hide guys, right? That's where we hide them, in the 3 hole. It's perfect.
Modernized baseball has kind of shifted from your best hitter being in the 3 spot to the 2 spot. So maybe Ollie trying to mix things up there. Maybe he's just trying to set up the heart of the order a little bit with a little bit more on-base threat. Ivan Herrera batting in the
yeah, you're going to say Herrera in the 2 hole. And, you're a youngin', I know it, but back in the day when I used to cover Tony La Russa, one of his favorite sayings, got to get some thunder in that 2 hole. Got to get some thunder in that 2 hole. And 100% today, This is the mindset. It's got to be.
And we also, and I remember the end of those Tony La Russa days. When I first really started getting into it was around 2009. And yes, I remember that he would have Ryan Ludwig bat in that 4 spot, that 5 spot sometimes pre-Matt Holliday. But he also would have him bat in that 2 spot. And Ryan Ludwig in 2009 was a 30-plus home run guy. So that stands up to the point. I think that Colby Rasmus would end up in that spot, that 2 spot a little bit as well. He would mix in there. So, the proof is put in the pudding that, you put a little bit, of thunder in that spot. It does tend to have success. And we saw Paul Goldschmidt there in his early days with the Cardinals.
Yep.
We've no doubt seen them go in that direction. And it wouldn't surprise me if Wilson Contreras ends up back there, but perhaps he's trying to, maybe that's the spot for the hottest hitter. And there is no doubt that the hottest hitter on this Cardinals team with 4 home runs in his past 2 games is Ivan Herrera right now for St. Louis.
Yeah, there's no doubt about it. I mean, you got to get him as many at-bats as possible. Our good friend, the normal host of this show, Joe Roderick, texting us before and saying, do you think that we're moving Herrera up just to get him more at-bats before they pull him for defense later in the game? It's probably got to be that has to be part of Ollie's thinking in this. But I would say the prevalent thought has to be, this guy's on fire like very few in Major League Baseball right now. I mean, you get him as many swings as you can and figure out ways to get him at the plate because he's seeing the ball as well as anyone right now. So, I love the move of putting him up there and riding that hot hand.
And before, I completely agree with that. I want to talk about Sound of Silence's comment here before, he mentioned Newton Herrera being at the top of the lineup. And then once again, Contreras being in that 3rd spot saying it makes 0 sense. One of the things that I think that fans don't take into consideration enough, and it's the same thing that happened the other day with Mason Wynn staying in the game when Nolan Gorman had the opportunity to bat in extra innings that could have potentially, set up for a better matchup for St. Louis in that situation where there was 2 outs in the I don't remember what inning. I think it was the 10th. It was the 10th. That was the game that they lost in 10th. And the reason that fans don't like, but it is true, is Ollie Marmol's going to have to manage these guys tomorrow. He's going to have to manage these guys in a week, in a month, in 3 months, right? A huge part of this game, especially this early in the season, is trusting your guys and showing that you have confidence in them. If Mason Wynn is your shortstop of the future, then there's a reason this early in the season where you say, no, I want you in this situation, even if maybe he isn't the guy that matches up the best in that situation in that moment. You don't have to agree with it, but I think fans understanding what Ollie is going for, understanding that aspect of managing is extremely important because there's a difference between, in my opinion, blindly disagreeing and saying that it's a terrible decision and saying, I don't agree with it, but I understand what the manager is going for in that situation. And I think that this is a similar one. Has Wilson Contreras been terrible to start off the year? Yeah, he has not looked very good at the plate. But is there an aspect of this that is saying, yes, Wilson, you are our guy. It has been 7 games. Have you looked good at the plate? No. But did you look phenomenal in spring training? Yes. So I think that there is an aspect of this that we have to be remembering that is like, yes, this guy has been your guy. He was your guy all season last year. He proved that this wasn't underlying issues during spring training. So I think that people have to remember that managers showing their trust in their guys is a huge aspect of this as well. Chris?
Well, and Ethan, let's keep one thing in mind. Let's call a spade on this one. It's not like they have a lot of options beyond, right? This formula, it has to work. Okay. There aren't 5 guys at AAA banging on the door to be everyday players. I think everyone's excited about JJ Weatherholt at some point in time, but he's a middle infield guy. There are not people who are there who are being blocked right now by Wilson Contreras, right? Wilson Contreras has to work out at first base. I know you could sit there and say, hey, Luken Baker could be a guy or this or that. But at the end of the day, I think Luken Baker is being pegged where he should be right now, which is, a very, very, powerful right-handed DH against left-handed pitching. He's a role player. So the point being, like you were saying, Mason Wynn, Wilson Contreras, these guys are a huge part of the recipe for this year. They have to get them right. If they do not get them right, it's just going to be bad for the team. So, I understand all of the criticisms because you can't hide behind the numbers. I mean, they are what they are. But at the end of the day, and I keep saying that's my John Mozeliak inner, it's at the end of the day. But they 100% have to get these guys right because, again, we just don't have alternatives. And I think the fans, and this is sort of a different topic, Ethan, but I'd like your thoughts on it. Do you think that the mindset of the fan has changed a little bit after 7 games? This team is going to be able to hit the ball, right? The pitching has been better than I think we thought. Eric Fetty had a bad start on Friday, but
Sure.
Sonny Gray's looked pretty good. Pallante, 1 start. I mean, but go back to last year. Andre Pallante is a above average major league starter at this point in time. Liberatore looked really good.
Mm-hmm.
Has the calculus changed for fans a little bit to where, I know if you're a team, if you're the Miami Marlins right now, I mean, you don't care a week in whether or not Wilson Contreras gets his at-bats from the standpoint of we're going to be awful this year. Let's think about 2026, 2027, beyond. I think this Cardinals team, especially in a division that has started okay and with some of the teams, but is winnable. I think a lot of Cardinal fans are going from last place finish, rebuild year to let's see. These guys have been better than I thought.
Yeah, I think fans are kind of stuck in that transition right now where some of them are starting to turn, are saying, okay, the product's been pretty good. 4-3. I think arguably you could say the Cardinals have played better than a 4-3 team in most part. I think
absolutely.
I think you're probably more risk. They could have swept the Angels, but there's going to be games like that you lose. But I think most fans are saying, okay, the product's been pretty good, but I think there also is a level of caution with how this team. I think the fans feel betrayed. I think fans feel betrayed by how things have been handled by the front office here these last couple of years. They've been used to a winning product for how many years? At least 2 decades, right? And now all of a sudden, the front office, coming out saying, they need to make some corrections with player development and things like that. Well, fans are saying, you're the ones that let player development get that bad. You're the ones that let it get, you took this away from us. So I think that there is some sense of betrayal, some sense of hurt. Do I think that fans are more optimistic? Yes, but I think that it's going to take more than 7 games of good product for the fans to be convinced that this team is going to be competitive, is going to continue doing things the right way. Things are definitely moving in the right direction, but I think we need to see a little bit more of this before fans fully are jumping ship and saying, this is what we're back on board. Our hurt is beyond us.
Yeah, and bottom line, I mean, I like these conversations that we have as Cardinal fans about, especially in the media, what is it that brings fans to the ballpark? And it's, the front office has clearly in years past thought that nostalgia is a big thing, right? Bringing back Pujols, which turned out to be a great baseball move, was basically done for PR. The Adam Wainwright contracts down the stretch. Oh, he's getting to 200. It's got to happen here. That sort of thing. I'm the guy who will sit here and tell you, you could bring back Ozzie Smith to play shortstop for Mason Wynn right now. If the Cardinals aren't winning, people aren't going to be in the stands. So, like you said, it's 7 games in. There's 155 left. But I got to tell you that I think if we get to May and the Cardinals are sniffing first place, a game or 2 out, this or that, I think we won't see 21,000 people in the stands. I think we'll see 25. We'll see 30. Agree. Winning products are what bring people. It's, as much as we like to pat ourselves on the back as the best fans in baseball, it's real easy to be a good fan when for 30 years the team has always been competitive. So again, the question is this team good enough to be competitive? And man, the first 7 games, admittedly a small sample size, have been very impressive in a lot of different ways. So, I don't know. I mean, I think as a fan myself, felt the exact same way. Offseason was a disaster. I understand the cutting of payroll. You kind of had to do it with the uncertainty behind the TV contracts. They could have done more. They could have traded for pre-arbitration guys. They could have done things that said, we're definitely going younger and cheaper, but we're still going to be good. They didn't do that, and I don't hate that they got away from free agency. Free agency has not been good to this team over the years. So, again, the message of apathy from fans, I think, is coming back because of the apathy from the front office when it didn't have to be that way. But again, a lot of it remains to be seen, but I will tell you that if we see 2 or 3 more weeks of play like the first week, I'd be stunned if we don't see Busch Stadium slowly filling up.
I completely agree with you there. Samuel brings up perhaps the best point that's brought up in this entire show. More bobblehead nights. Let's bring them, baby. And I know this is being sent probably at least partially jokingly. But I will say the Cardinals promotion, I guess, promotional product,
Yep.
their
giveaways, stuff.
Yeah, their game atmosphere, like those kind of things. They did go into the offseason, I think, with a mindset. We saw all these changes like pre-opening day saying like, hey, we're going to have this at the ballpark this year. We're going to have this at the ballpark. They brought back some of the cheaper beer to the this year. It's in the Bud Terrace. They're having DJs, like more music. They changed the pregame in-stadium pregame show. They have different music playing on different speakers in different spots in the ballpark. Like we know that they have changed the function in which they're going about some of this stuff. And I think that there was probably a little bit of a reality check saying that, hey, we can't just rely on the team winning anymore to bring fans to the ballpark, because that's what it's been for a long time. They haven't had to do some of this stuff because the product on the field has been so good, and that the traditional baseball fan in St. Louis has come down for that. So I will say kudos to the Cardinals for trying to implement some of this more modern stuff to try to bring fans down in a different way, bring just a better atmosphere, I guess I would say.
I don't disagree, but I mean, it doesn't matter what sport we're talking about. People show up to watch winners, and that's
100%.
And again, and I think when you would have asked before the season, most people would have said this is a last place team. I don't know if those same people would have said that, or will say that after 7 games. They've shown far more than I think most people were prepared for.
I do completely agree with that. Let's continue talking about some of the chat's thoughts here. We want to hear your thoughts in the live chat. This is Sports Hub STL. We want you guys to be just as as much a part of the show as Chris and I are. Samuel brings up another interesting thought, and we talked about it for a brief moment earlier, talking about Herrera getting that third at bat. I don't have much interest in mentioning the Ollie and Heim talking part, but when you talk about that defensive replacement and how Ollie Marmol has been using Pedro Pages and Ivan Herrera, fans aren't happy with it, because fans want to see Ivan Herrera in there every day, because yes, he is your best hitter right now. The framing has been better. Some of the things behind the plate has been better, but the arm is clearly still nowhere close yet. And it's been a little bit discouraging, even hearing all the work that he put in this past offseason with it. It makes you wonder, what can it get any better? Will it get any better for Ivan Herrera? I want to hear your thoughts on this, Chris, not only on Ivan Herrera and the arm struggles, but what are your thoughts on how Ollie Marmol has been managing the back and forth between his two catchers?
I've heard the argument that this is a rebuilding year, so we need to give Ivan Herrera all the opportunity to become a better defensive player. And I honestly, I don't see that. I don't understand. This is not single A baseball, right? Where we will handle losing in the sake of development. That can't be the focus of this team. And it shouldn't be the focus of this team, because this team is good enough, it looks like early on, to contend a little bit. Again, we could talk again in 2 months and they could be 15 games under 500 and, tra la la. At that point in time, let's see if Herrera can ever throw anyone out. At this point in time, you have, Herm Edwards, you play to win the game, right? Like, I mean, this is the way that this is the best mode of deploying his catchers to win baseball games. And, we can talk about development. This is kind of a side topic to a degree, but, I'm old enough to remember when Yadier Molina was brand new to the Cardinals, and Mike Matheny was the incumbent. Here comes this kid, defensive whiz who couldn't hit a lick. And you see, you saw the defense from Molina right from day one. I mean, great catcher of the game, huge arm. He was different. Matheny was obviously a great defensive player, didn't hit real well either. But when they made that transition, Yadier Molina sort of said to himself, I can have a good major league career. I can have a darn near Hall of Fame one. And Molina worked more on his hitting. Good that his best friend was Albert Pujols, but worked more on his hitting than any person on the Cardinals. And Yadier Molina went from, honestly, a guy who, if you watched him in his first year, say, I don't know, this guy has the bat to stick around for another year in baseball, despite how good of a catcher he is. He worked himself into a serviceable hitter. At some point, he was actually probably one of the better hitting catchers in baseball. And that was a total testament to his work ethic. I would say that the same thing can apply, this whole model, to both Mason Wynn and Ivan Herrera. I don't think Mason Wynn's ever going to be Ernie Banks. Mason Wynn came up, out of high school as a two-way player. That's how good that arm was. People thought he might pitch in the majors, but the question was the bat, right? The athleticism was fantastic. The fielding was fantastic. The arm's fantastic. The hitting, What we saw from Mason Wynn last year showed to me that Mason Wynn is the kind of guy who puts in all the work. That's why I'm not worried about this slump right now. He is going to work himself out of it because he's a good enough athlete to get to the point where he can be a good hitter. I don't think there's any doubt. I don't know that he'll ever be one of the elite silver slugger caliber shortstop. But the defense, the speed, all that stuff is going to play up. Herrera, I think we can see that the bat plays regardless. Now the question is, can the defense get to a serviceable level? And, if you're talking about technique, you're talking about pitch framing. Yeah, those are things. I just don't know, as somebody who had a terrible arm his entire baseball career, what you can do to get that much better.
Yeah.
So, I don't want to be pessimistic. And at this point in time, his bat is playing so well that you have to find a way to get it in the lineup.
Right.
I think of Mike Piazza, who had a Hall of Fame career as a pretty mediocre defender at catcher. Is his bat going to be that good? I don't know. I mean, it's a sliding scale, Ethan, at this point in time. If he is a legit 330 home run guy, you got to get him in the lineup.
Right.
There's no two ways about it, and you can win with that. Having said that, that hasn't been the Cardinal way, right? And obviously with 20 years of Yadier Molina, we're used to impeccable defense behind the plate. And we all know that plays into the way a catcher can handle a pitching staff as well, right? Pitchers want defenders. They want people who are going to help them get outs. So, this is very much of a to be determined. I've got to say, the early returns aren't great. And if it gets to a point where Herrera has thrown no one out and it's teams with real speed, like the Red Sox do have. I mean, if you look at their lineup today, I know we haven't gotten there, but I mean, they've got 4 or 5 guys in that lineup who probably should steal both bases every time they get on base today. That's gonna result in losses if you are giving people bases like that. So situationally, it is what it is, and it's a tough task for Ali. I don't know that you pull the plug on Herrera at catcher just yet, but in the meantime, while we're seeing what he can do, I think you 100% have to do it the way they're doing it. 6 innings. If we're in a close game late, you got to bring Pajas in, who, by the way, he's not Molina defensively. He's just a pretty decent defender.
Right.
And so, I think for the time being, they got to do it. If we get to August and this team is maybe out of it at that point in time, maybe that's when we start seeing Ivan Herrera first baseman, because, again, it's just at some point you got to get to be serviceable. And right now he's not serviceable.
Right. I think that you summed that up perfectly. Could not have summed it up any better. Joseph brings up a point that I think I've heard some fans mentioning here in the early days of the season. Why not move Wilson Contreras back to catcher and make Herrera the first baseman? I think they've made it clear that they want Contreras at first base because they want to keep him in the lineup, keep him healthy. That has been a challenge here these last couple of years. Obviously, a couple of freak injuries last year behind the plate for him. That is a bat that you want in your lineup. But it does put the Cardinals in a tough situation because, I do understand why fans are asking that with how bad that Ivan Herrera, his arm has been behind the plate. You can't have him continue being back there if it's not going to improve and you expect this team to compete. If you expect this pitching to be solid this year, you can't expect that. But you have no room at first base.
Yep.
You have no room at the designated hitter position. So that's the problem that the Cardinals are in right now. It's going to be very interesting to see how they handle that this year, Chris. Let's go ahead and let's, as we begin to wrap up here, let's talk about this Boston Red Sox lineup that is led off by Jarren Duran in left field. Rafael Devers continues to play in the designated hitter role. He's in the 2 spot. Alex Bregman, the newest Boston Red Sox member, is playing at third, and Tristan Casas is at first base in the cleanup spot. Trevor Story, he sure did give the Cardinals a world of hurt in Friday's game. He's batting 5th, playing at short. And then Rob Refsnyder is in right field, batting 6th. He is followed by the big prospect man for the Red Sox, Christian Campbell. He is batting 7th. And in the 8th spot at second base, David Hamilton. And rounding out the lineup is Connor Wong behind the plate. This lineup, 13 runs on the Cardinals on Friday on their opening day, which I will say the pictures, everything that the writers were posting, it looked really cool. That is one of the things, I guess specifically for opening day series, that kind of stuff for the Cardinals and the Red Sox and opening day series, that looked pretty freaking cool. Hopefully the crowd continues to be energetic. I imagine it will today at Fenway. But this Red Sox lineup, no joke, they looked pretty solid, and a Cardinals starting pitching crew that has looked good to start off the year. A bullpen that in large part, outside of really John King and Ryan Fernandez, has looked really good to start off the year. They took advantage of them on Friday. We'll see if the Cardinals are able to respond back today. Gordon Graceffo, the Cardinals' 27th man today. We'll see if he gets any time out there. The Cardinals now, I guess, did have the off day yesterday, but they played 2 today. So it'll be interesting to see how Oliver Marmol handles his bullpen today. Looking forward to seeing how exactly it gets handled.
You'd love Pellante to go deep in this first one and just make things a little bit easier on Michaelis. And honestly, if you're talking about a pitcher to pitch in Fenway, Andre Pellante is as good as you can offer with, the ground ball rate. And I will tell you too, great, big break for the Cardinals is that Willie Abreu is not in the lineup today. Mm-hmm. I think he's battling something. That's where Rob Refsnyder is going to be in right field. Abreu has been incredibly hot to start the season. Interesting little note. So Christian Campbell, who you mentioned, the all-world, just got his $80 million contract after 7 games. I don't really love that concept, but he's making his debut in center field today. So they're going to do this a little bit. The guy, he's obviously a second baseman by trade. They've got a guy named David Hamilton who they love. And David Hamilton is, if we're talking about, David Hamilton is on his knees right now praying to God that he somehow gets on base today. He is extremely fast. You might as well put him on third base if Herrera's catching. Hamilton is a huge speed guy. So, again, and then, of course, Rafael Devers, 12 games against the Cardinals. He's slugging over 600 in those games. He had been terrible the first 6 games of the season, 15 strikeouts or something like that in his first 5. Sorry. Here come the Cardinals just in time for Devers to get right. So, again, hopefully Pellante keeps the ball down all day. I'd love to see 6+ out of Pellante to make the bullpen a little bit more reasonable in the second game. You don't know what Michaelis is going to give you. I'd love to see Graceffo get in there. I know that they started using him a little bit more in the higher leverage situations in spring training, the shorter inning stuff. Obviously his stuff plays in that regard. So, I'd like to see him get an opportunity. But again, this is the day, we don't talk about must wins in April, but you've got 2 guys pitching for the Red Sox today who are gettable. They could have run into Garrett Crochet, who is not. They got 2 guys to get. It'd be really nice to walk out of Boston with a Sunday sweep today. So,
just a reminder for all of our lovely listeners out there that the Card Sub 365 show is powered by Gray Bar here on Sports MSTL and presented by DraftKings. The crown is yours. Download the DraftKings Pick 6 app now and use the code STL Sports. That's code STL Sports for new customers to play $5, get $50 in Pick 6 credits, better payouts, better wins, only with Pick 6 from DraftKings. The crown is yours.
Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. Help is available for problem gambling. Call 888-789-7777 or visit ccpg.org in Connecticut. Must be 18 and over. Age and eligibility restrictions vary by jurisdiction. Pick 6 not available everywhere, including New York and Ontario. Void where prohibited. 1 per new customer. Bonus awarded as non-withdrawable Pick 6 credits that expire in 14 days. Limited time offer. See terms at pick6.draftkings.com/promos.
Cards Hub 365 continues on. We're going to go ahead and wrap up here with this final thought. The bullpen, some serious concerns in Friday's game, and there have been some moments early in the year where they've looked really good, but there's also been some concerning moments. So after Friday's game, I broke down what the Cardinals bullpen has looked like specifically with in some certain games with some certain guys, and prior to Friday's game, the Cardinals team ERA was 2.66. They're also one of, I think, 3 teams that have not allowed a home run from their bullpen. and they have pitched the most amount of innings out of those 3 teams. So not letting the long ball up is most definitely encouraging. Now, however, on Friday, the bullpen stats were not as pretty. 5 innings pitched, 7 earned runs. That's a 12.6 ERA for those that were wondering. So things definitely not playing friendly at Fenway Park. And then I took it a little bit further. I was like, okay, well, out of the, these guys that they've had so far, what has Ryan Fernandez and John King, in my opinion, have been the ones that had been the most concerning. They struggled again on Friday. Ryan Fernandez and John King's combined ERA, they've only thrown 5 innings up to this point, but it's an ERA around 14.5. The rest of the bullpen, 23 2/3 innings, a 2.28 ERA. So is the bullpen struggling a little bit early in the season? Take it how you want, because some guys are, but in large part, it's been a couple of guys have struggled in big moments. They've had big numbers, and but outside of that, I don't know if I'm really fully on the bandwagon that the bullpen is a concern yet. Now, maybe those couple of guys, if they don't figure it out, but let's remember that, these guys have both had 2-3 appearances now. And last year, Ryan Fernandez and John King were huge parts of that bullpen. Fernandez ended up with a 3.5 ERA. John King had a sub-3 ERA. Now, obviously, his moments that he was playing in, he wasn't the number 1 lefty. That was Jojo Romero, and Ryan Fernandez, was not the number 1 setup guy. He was behind Kittredge. So, and of course, and Helsley as well. But I think that, in my opinion, Chris, before we wrap up, I want to hear your thoughts on this. Let's slow down. Let's press the brakes on the panic about the bullpen, because yes, those couple of guys have struggled in the first couple of starts to start off the season. But let's see if they can get into things a little bit, kind of like what we're saying with Mason Wynn, with Wilson Contreras. Yes, I know the track record isn't there for these guys that it is for Wilson Contreras, but I'm on the side of let's slow down and let's press the brakes, because in large part I think the bullpens look pretty solid, especially when you take into consideration they've also had to throw in a couple of extra inning games already.
Well, and I'll preface this by saying I'm the guy who despises the concept of giving a multi-year contract to a reliever. There's a reason people are relief pitchers. It's because they lack consistency.
Mm-hmm.
Now, there are a few out there. Helsley's been this way. You can look at the Josh Haders of the world. But for the most part, you get guys in the bullpen because they only have 2 pitches. They can't throw a third one real well, and they struggle with consistency. So to see Fernandez, who was fantastic last year, and King, who was fantastic last year, struggling out of the gate, it's not surprising to me. You can't have it if you want to win baseball games. So what they did last year, you got to give them a little bit of runway to work it out. But these guys are also guys with options too. So it's like,
Sure.
we look at, if Graceffo comes in today and pitches an inning or 2 and looks fantastic. Well, Graceffo can handle the Fernandez role. I mean, he's not
Right.
the top right-handed setup guy, right? Like, we've got Phil Maton doing that right at this point in time. Same with King. King's not the primary left-handed guy. That's Romero. So yeah, give him a little bit of runway. Maybe you put him in lower leverage situations than they have been. See if they can work their kinks out. The arm talent's obviously there in both of them. But by the same token, I do think there are reinforcements in the bullpen that could come up and help. So again, I mean, I would tell you that I think that let's be smart where we use these guys. Same, and I know Matt's pitched really well in his first outing, not so well the other day on Friday. And so again, it's one of these things that, bullpen is so finicky, and it's nice to have guys who are available, in Memphis, who can come up and maybe take some 6th and 7th innings here and there. But the important part is that Helsley looks great. Maton looks great. Romero looks great. So, that's your bullpen right there. The rest, yeah, we got to be smart about how we use things. And again, back to my original point about Pellante, let's get 6 innings out of you today, 7 innings, and make this a little bit easier on the bullpen.
And it won't be long. This is game number 8 of the season for the Cardinals. Once they play 10, they can begin using guys from Memphis, from AAA, and they can start optioning these guys. You have to stick with the same 10, you have to stick for the first 10. You have to stick with your pitching crew for that time being. So that's why we haven't seen the Cardinals make any moves yet, but that'll be coming, no doubt, here in a couple of games. It wouldn't surprise me if we start seeing them use Memphis and some of those options for some of these guys. So he is Chris Pelikan. I am Ethan Hannaford. This has been Cards Hub 365. powered by Gray Bar and presented by DraftKings. The crown is yours. We appreciate you guys tuning in. Excited to see what the Cards are able to do in today's doubleheader against Boston. We will have the post-game show following both the first and the second game, so be sure to keep an eye, and you'll be able to continue sharing your thoughts, hopefully positive thoughts after what. Let's get a sweep in Boston today. Thanks again, Chris. We appreciate it.
Yep, thanks, Ethan.
We'll wrap up here, and we will say so long. This has been Cards Up 365 on Sports Hub STL.